Hello everyone and welcome back. My name is Audrey Shantz and I'm a watercolor artist and a watercolor teacher, and we are in our series called Planter Buddies and we're having a great time with it. So here is what we're going to do for the second one. It's a Monstera plant and a Hippo planter, just kind of simple and cute. I love this one. So we're going to look at a photo of a Monstera plant and we're going to just sit and sketch the whole thing together and then paint. Let's go through supplies really quick. You're going to need some kind of watercolor paints. I've got a size 10 round watercolor brush, a pencil, and a kneaded eraser. And then I have water and some kind of a towel. You can do paper towel. I just prefer using a towel. It's helpful if you have a little spray bottle for your paints and some sort of a heat tool that you can use to dry in between layering. And then I have a 3" by 3" piece of cold press watercolor paper. This one's the Canson brand. And I think that's it. So make sure that you have something to drink, and maybe you, wait a minute guys, I almost didn't light my candle. All right, we're lighting the candle. Everybody get cozy. It just helps. In fact, I'm so cold right now because it's like 20 degrees outside. I have a heated blanket down here now that is like a literal game changer. So here's my candle. I didn't skimp on it, so you shouldn't either. And I've got my heated blanket, which is life-changing. And now let's paint. Okay, we are going to start with observing. You can take a screenshot of this one if you would like to. But this is a Monstera plant, just a very simple one. It doesn't have to be photorealistic, but I just always want to kind of hit the impression of it. This is a Hippo planter. It's nice and wide. Just got some little toes. It's a very simple shape, but man, is that cute or what? Especially I feel like when you see all of these together, if you keep doing the series, so cute together. This time I did go ahead and print out a Monstera plant. And I believe this is the one that I did use for the reference. And so you can see there's different color variations in there. It's all coming out from the center up and away. There's some very large leaves. Some of them have these holes in them and some do not. There's small leaves, there's very large ones. And what I really like is this shape, how it's almost heart at the top. It dips down in and comes up, right? And it comes to a little cute little point at the end. We're not going to get too detailed about like the color variations of these, but if you wanted to paint a more photorealistic Monstera plant and you looked at a reference like this, you would really take it little by little. You would maybe do one of the leaves at a time and really try to see how highlighted this area is on your painting. It would be very light here as well, and you'd really be working on like layering and details. You can just do a much more like slow and detailed job if you're going one at a time like that. We're not going that I don't know, I want to say like high tech today. We're doing this guy, but this is where it came from, and that's a Monstera plant. So we're going to go ahead. I'll just kind of leave them both in view a little bit, but we're going to go ahead and start sketching this. The most important thing I'll say here, if you've watched my videos by now, you know, is to press lightly with your pencil. That's such a big deal, and make sure you have a good eraser nearby. So once again, and I'm sorry I keep clearing my throat. I was really sick a few weeks ago and can't quite get over it. So, all right, I'm going to zoom in for you. What I just did was I did a mark at the top and a mark at the bottom where I think about halfway is. And let's see. I can't tell if they're right or they're wrong, but they're pretty close. And if I want to, I can kind of connect them really gently like this. You can get out a ruler. You just don't need to, all right? It's kind of nice to learn how to sort of eyeball things like this. And since this is like a really kind of nice and wide planter, you can see that on this page, mine's a little crooked. There's less space here than there is here. And we're going to try to kind of get it centered. Not a big deal, but we'll try. If I were to look at this and kind of divide it up like this, my planter starts a little below what would be probably like center on here. So we're going to do that. You can try to find where do you think center would be and come just maybe a little bit below that. We're just going to start to put some marks that are going to guide us and help us with symmetry. So I've got this one. I'm going to do the same thing down here, but what do I need to pay attention to is that I need to make sure I leave space for the feet, and I'd rather how this one doesn't touch the bottom than this one. Okay, so I'm going to come maybe like here. I think that'll give me a good amount of space. Why don't you try to decide how wide do you want yours to be? So you're putting these marks. I think once again, this might be consistent for us, is that we leave about a finger width. And that would make this guy a little bit thinner though. So maybe a little bit less than a finger on either side. Somewhere near there. I think that was okay. Yeah, I kind of like where I had it, I think. And then we're pressing lightly because in a minute you're going to start to see if this is like really wonky or not. And you can't know until you do it, so we're getting in there. Let's start to fill it in a little bit. We'll kind of connect this, maybe same on the bottom. This helps me make sure these line up. We want a nice curved corner. And then down here it curves kind of even more. But we're all going to have different ones here. You know, they'll be a little different. That's cute. It can be like this, or it can be straighter sides. I don't know. Sometimes it's fun to just play with it in the moment. I think, you know, it's going to be different every time you would sit down to sketch it. You're going to maybe like your lines slightly differently. So that's all we need. And then from here, since we have our center, let's make sure that those feet are on either side. Now the feet are basically rectangles, maybe with curved corners at the edge, okay? And look, I can fit more than 1 foot in the middle. So let's kind of leave some space. You can go like this and decide how much space you want in the middle. And then go ahead and get your little rectangles in. And sometimes it's fun to just sketch them really skinny, sketch them really wide, and change it up and just see which ones you like. But that's pretty cute. Now we're going to find center, and you can see that on this hippo's face, it's almost like the number 8. This one's a little bit smaller, this bottom one's a little bit taller, but it's like a little part of a snowman, right? And then we'll give it the ears. But the top circle is about halfway through that line. So really this, if you've done this center line, it's like a perfect guide for where this is going to go. That's the center. Cool, huh? So I've got this, and I want to do one more. You can give it like an overlap like that if you want. I do want some space under there, so I'm trying not to let it get too big. Oh my goodness, we're off to a great start. Now I'm going to have these little like ovals for ears. I'm thinking more oval than circle. And since we're about this far, okay, I think we'll add the toes, and then we're going to start to erase what we don't need in these little hippos. So this is going to be like lump, lump, lump. Ready? Lump, lump, lump. Or rainbow, rainbow, rainbow. I'm going to grab my eraser, and this is a kneaded eraser, so I can just kind of squeeze it and use the small part to kind of get in here. I want that center line fully gone now. I don't want to see any lines through the face of the hippo, except for one. Actually, I erased it, but I'll show you that in a minute. But that's everything I don't want to see is gone now. One thing I do like on this one is actually if we leave this one, leave the bottom part. So I'm going to come back and just kind of give it like this. And I think that might give us a nice way to add our paint right here. It's like a guide, because that gives dimension when we add this darker. See how it's a little bit darker here, a little bit darker around here. Okay, we're going to add 2 dots for eyes and 2 dots for nostrils. It's cute. And from here, excuse me, we're going to start getting into our Monstera plant. So we're going to try to keep some of these little circles in here in the leaves, and we're going to preserve them, so we cannot put paint where those are if we want them to stay white. So that's something we're going to remember from the beginning. And then remember, if we look at this reference, that they all come up and out from that center. So that's something we're gonna keep in mind, which means they all start behind his head. And I like to just kind of go, where's it going? If I start this one, it's going kind of up here, right? And I know it's coming this way. Let's press lightly and just get all the stems in. We'll just erase what we don't want. Here's one. There's one that comes out this direction for this, right? We got one that comes up and to the right and up again a little. That's this one. Okay, another one that comes straight towards the center. This one's a little shorter and it goes kind of straight up. So if you're like, oh my gosh, Audrey, slow down. I get it. You might start with this center one coming up. And then you can use this guy as a guide and start to get these ones in. As a reminder, you can always pause me as well. It's kind of a perk of being online. Well, the other perk is hopefully you're in your pajamas right now. Okay, I just did a stem which goes towards this big guy. And now I look, I see I want 1, 2, and I'll add a leaf to one of the stems. So really, it's just this big like splay of, you know, it's like, whoosh, they're all kind of coming out from that center. So once we get to this, we can start really just kind of, we're gonna go large leaf. Stick it in here, smaller leaf, and we'll just kind of make some observations and go from there. I'm gonna move this one out, get a little zoomed in for you. Let's say you did like that starting from the center, then we can start with that center leaf as well. And now, the tricky thing about these is like we want them to look somewhat realistic. So sometimes when we do a leaf, we just go, that's a leaf. But in this case, we would want that leaf, like if I move that leaf, it might be this shape, right? And that's what's happening here is they're all in different positions, and we're going to try to make sense of where does the stem come, okay? And then if that stem were to follow through the leaf, what direction is it going to give us, right? So that might give us like this, see? Okay, so coming back to it, we'll do this center one first. There's a bit of like a V in the top of it like this. It's like a sort of like a check mark, right? And then it's going to curve and come down, come flatter over to the right, dip up and down. You're just copying this. So don't overthink it, because all you're doing is seeing a weird shape and trying to copy it. You're not necessarily thinking Monstera plant. Sometimes we can intimidate ourselves by trying to, it's like, especially, I'm going to try to draw a hand. Instead, if you know, if this is the hand and you're like, I'm just going to draw this shape, and you don't even think of it a hand, you may have more success. So here we go. I just erased the center. I took all the stem lines out of the center. Notice this is not the same. I don't care. This line will come down this way, and that helps me make sense of this shape a little bit more. And now I'm going to go ahead and put in some of these little circles or ovals, and think about how they're coming. They're all coming is like the veins would come out and away from that center, and so these are doing the same. Stick a couple of them in there. You want it to be big enough that you can see white through your pencil lines. Does that make sense? So like my pencil lines are kind of thick. So sharpen your pencil if you need to, right? Because we do want to paint around it and then have the white of the paper show through. I'm going to keep us moving along here. This one will come up, and I'm going to do the same thing. Up and over, straight across, and then tips down. I'm sorry, I'm trying to guard you from my coughing. Okay, I'm going to start back up here now because that makes more sense to me. Up and to the right, down on like a 45-degree angle, and comes down. It's not 45 degrees, but we don't care. Then I'm going to go, okay, here is where the stem would come, is right here where it dips in. So up and over, and then I'll add some ovals. You're painting, well, you're sketching a Monstera plant right now. Isn't that so cool? Same thing. This one's like a sideways heart. What if I just think of it like that? You know, and then you can go, oh, well, it's pretty good, but what about if I changed this part here? And just get in there and make some little changes. You can add these ovals to the inside of any leaves that you want. My stem got far here, so I'm going to back it up by erasing the end. Let's decide where it's going. It's going to overlap the corner just a little bit, and I think that's cute. So here's a dot, which is, I'm finding this point, sticking it here. And then let's kind of start, what do we see? It comes up to the right, diagonal, kind of over, up to the right, diagonal, over and down. Sometimes with these things, it's nice to say it out loud, say what's happening. And then sometimes you're like, no, I just need gut. I need my gut to work. It's just different for different things sometimes, I think. But sometimes when you're trying to really make sense of what you're doing, if you can say it out loud as you go, it might be helpful. I know it sounds weird. I'm going to add one in here, just one. Okay, we've done, oops, there's one little guy. Let's just add a regular looking leaf right there. Now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to come over and do this big one. So first of all, this is now on the left side of him. Okay, we have done the right. We're over here. If yours doesn't look like that, you may want to shift some stems just to give some balance to it. Okay, now we're going to do this one, which is on an angle like this. And why don't you just stick some dots on there? Maybe this is where you want it to end and you want it to come all the way up to here. That might be helpful. We'll do this dip in the center. Curves and straight lines, both. And we are just sort of following this. This is like a heart with some straight lines in it. Great. If you look at it and you don't like it, just make some little changes. Don't press super hard on your pencil. I feel like I'm getting hard on my pencil here. Okay, find that center stem. And then we'll stick a few of these little ovals in. And I feel like because that's such a distinct feature of a Monstera plant, it really nails in. Okay, this is a Monstera. Makes it clear for, and like helps people understand it. We have got 3 leaves over here. We are so almost done with the sketch. You're doing amazing. I'm trying to find that dip first, and this one's a little more mild. Okay, where is it going to go? I want it to go all the way to here. And that's such a great guide, is putting a dot where you want it to go, or mine maybe was going to end here, and I really want it further. I love that overhang on a plant, is always really beautiful. And I'm going to do something like that. We'll find the center by finding our dip, following it, and it's typically, you know, just end to end. If you can find where that would go, we'll get one of those little ovals. I think that may be too many ovals, really. They don't all have it. I have a Monstera plant that was like back in my intro. You maybe, oh no, mine's a little different. Mine's like this. It has like big cutouts like that. So if I'm saying Monstera and it's like a certain variety, that's going to happen this whole time. So just stick with me. It'll happen with every plant we do. Okay, I'm getting another one in here, and they do not have to be exactly the same as what we're seeing. So if you ever just want to learn how to draw what you see, sometimes stick with me. If you want to just get something that looks like this on your paper and you don't care too much, you've already paused me or have music playing right now. Okay, I feel like that's pretty good. And sometimes the sketch is so long, I just feel like, all right, let's start busting a move over into getting our paints ready. Here's my paints from last time I painted. And so I always like to look, is this what I need? What colors do I need? And I'm kind of in luck right now because I do have the 2 different greens. And we're not going to do a huge variety of color on this one. You can do some, but where I really want to see it is on these stems. You can see a light green and dark green. That's all I really care about today. Maybe we'll make one side a little darker than the other, if you can see here where I've done that. But we're not going to worry too much about color variation. We do want to have a cutie little purple here, and you can see that within the purple there are spots that are darker, so that will be that wet on wet technique that you know I love to do. So why don't you figure out, is your hippo going to be purple? Like, that's where we got to start, you know? If so, and if you have my color palette, I think I did that third purple up, and then now that's like not the right color for me. I right ahead mixed it with whatever was on my palette. So if you've got a section with some purples, mix it and see what you come up with, okay? Let me see what I'm going to do here. Okay, there's this really nice sort of opaque looking blue right above that dark purple. So this would be the third one up is the purple, fourth one up in the center is this blue. And I'm going to mix those for a minute and see what I think. I'm pretty happy with that combo. But you look at yours, maybe you've got a, I don't know what color. Maybe yours is just blue, or I don't know. Pink, a pink hippo would be cute too. So I'm going to take this. I feel like that's a pretty good puddle, but because I mixed colors, I need to consider something. When I paint this, we'll paint this whole thing in, and then we will load in a darker color paint. So you got to think, what color paint are you going to load in? And if you've taken two colors, you can't so easily come right from your palette. But what you can do is create a small puddle made up of those same two colors. So now I have just a, touch my brush to my towel. I have like a damp brush, a little bit more than damp. And I'm going to take my brush and grab some purple and grab some of that blue. And then I'm going to start this, where can I put it? Right here. I'm going to start this small puddle that is made up of those colors. So when I do my wet on wet technique, I can take from my big puddle, and then I'll take from this for those sides. Now you can always like make up more than you need to, or just take them right from the direct paints. But it's just nice to have a plan and feel like you're like, you know, you've prepped and you've thought about it here before you get to your paper. I'm going to decide what color green. I'm going to mix these for a minute and see what I come up with. I want it to be a little more like maybe a yellowish green. You decide what you think. I'm not sure it necessarily leans either way, but if anything, it probably leans towards a yellow or green. And I'm just playing with my paints for a minute. I'm mixing probably more than you'd think. So you play with them too. Get a color that you like. And then I want you to make sure that it's a sort of, let's see if I have my, this is our booklet. If you haven't done the 30 watercolor tips and tricks, there's a whole free printable and really sort of just educational videos there. But this is my value scale. I want to make sure my darker one is probably somewhere like in like here maybe, and then I want a lighter color that's maybe here. So do you see as far as lightness to darkness? Because I want to definitely be able to see the difference when I get to this. So I've created one that's kind of darker. That feels pretty good. And here's another little trick. I don't want that brown there, so I just got a wet brush and grabbed it. And I'm going to clean my brush and just wipe my brush on my towel. So it was a quick way to pick that up and have a nice free space. And then I'll just get probably some of that lime green, maybe with some yellow. Something like that. I just want this nice light color. I think that feels just fine to me. And so I'm going to add water to get it even lighter. In watercolor, we get our colors lighter by adding water. If any of these videos felt are feeling like it's too fast, if you do the 30-day series, I think that would help you out. Here we are. Okay, we're going to start with the planter because I don't know why, but that's what I always do. And this will be a wet on wet technique. We'll take from our larger lighter colored puddle of purple, and we are going to fill in every part of this hippo except for the toes. We're going to avoid the toes because we want them to be white, so we'll preserve them. So that's just the color of the paper. One thing I just want you to watch for is that we will then be adding in dark color in all these spaces where you see dark color. So we might be lifting, which is cleaning your brush and drying it, pressing and lifting up and getting rid of some paint. or we might be loading in that darker color. So this is a fun process. Let's get to it. I'm going to take my brush. I'm cleaning it, I'm drying it on the towel. That's how I'm starting. And then I will take and put about the first half of my brush into my light purple paint puddle. I'm going to start painting this. The tip of my brush runs along the edges, and I lean into the belly of my brush so that I paint this whole thing quickly and efficiently. If I did it very slow with the tip of my brush, it's not going to work because the top over here will dry before you even get over here, and we need this whole surface to be wet. And that's because this is a wet on wet technique. So how wet? I'm going to show this to you. You can see the light reflecting, and you can also see the texture of my paper through it. Now right here it's puddling a little, so I just touched my brush to my towel, and I'll go like this and lift just a little bit of it up. From here I will take my brush, I'll go right into that puddle that I created, and I'm going to look, where do I want to see some darkness? That's it. I want to see it on these edges. Okay. Now, the more water you have, the further that water is going to travel across your paper. You can tell it's too dry over here. So what am I going to do? I'm going to quickly clean my brush out, wipe it on my towel, and come back with a damp brush and add water right next to it. Now I should get the effect that I want. Right away, I dried my towel or my paintbrush on my towel, and I'll go right back into that puddle I created and keep darkening things up. I want to do it while it's nice and wet, because that's how I'm going to get these softy bleeds, and that's what we want. So I'm coming under here because the roundness of the planter would shadow the legs. That's why I'm doing this. It's a little much. I'm going to have to probably... So I think I needed to err on the side of just a little bit more water. So we're just getting into that darker puddle, and now I want some shadow around the head, but behind it. Okay, if the head was like this, it'd be sticking out. So it would create some shadowing right behind it. Refresh your puddles if you need to, and that's okay. But we do want to do this while it's wet so we get the effect that we want. You can tell I changed my color. I'm a hot mess right now, but we're all okay. All right. And I'm just looking. So we're all doing the same thing. We're like, where do I want to add some darkness before this dries? And the only thing that happens when it dries is that you're going to have hard lines. So it'll be like a new layer that sits on top. And we just kind of want this softness. Or I do. You can think about that. Now, I really like what I got going on here. I for sure wanted some on the face and under. So round, round. Okay. I really like what that's doing. My lines feel a little bit bold, but as this dries, that water continues to pull the paint and disperse it through, so that will help us as well. I don't know if I want it maybe a little bit darker, so it's tricky because as it dries, if you want to change the color, you got to be really careful about it and really like efficient about it. I'm darkening this up just a little bit. But watch and see what happens when you do so, because everything you do with watercolor has an effect, and you want to just sort of start to observe what it is. This feels pretty good to me. I still want darkness in the corner of the ears. I think mine's probably dry enough to do so, but if your head was all wet, then I wouldn't want to get into those ears yet, because this won't stay where you tell it. But I think mine's okay. So I'm going to stick it right in there. Just right in the center of the ears. Now, if you added this, and let's say you're looking at the head and you're like, it's too much, you can clean your brush, dry it in your water jar, dry it on your towel, and lift some of that right back out. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and give mine a full dry because I like the bottom. I feel good about it. And then we're going to get into painting those Monstera leaves. We are simplifying those leaves, okay? So if you wanted to take more time on it and you want to look up a Monstera plant and really work on where do you want to see darkness and light in this, absolutely you can do so. But I'm just going to start by taking my brush. I have about maybe the first third or so of my brush into my paint, and all I'm going to do is start painting. Skip the stems, I would say. Or if you want to do the stems, okay, here's how you can not skip them. All right, so if we're going to start to fill one of these in, and I'm very light on the tip of my brush, and I very much have, I don't have more than 1/3 of my brush into the water. Look, I already missed one of these on accident, and I'm just going to leave it. As you do the stem, stay to the right. Go just to the right of the stem, and when we come with our light color, we're going to put it just to the left of it after this is dry. So we definitely need to be working from a puddle, but because these are small spaces, we want control. We don't want to be messing around with just like puddles getting everywhere. We won't get the details that we want. I'm going to show you something on this next one. So still light on the tip of my brush. I needed to add just a little bit of water, so I did that for this one. And what I do want to do is, to show you how to get a little bit more dimension in these leaves, I'm going to just dip my brush right into a darker green. I don't actually even care which one it is. Just grabbed a little bit from my paints. And I'm going to add it just to one side while it's wet. I know that seems like drastic. You can clean your brush and dry it and use a damp brush to sort of soften up that line of it. But it really does give it dimension, especially by the end. So if you want to do that on halves and see how it works out, great. If you want to try that on a scrap piece of paper first and then, you know, check it out there, see what you think, that's great too. As I'm trying to keep control, it's funny because I usually use a lot of water, but I find that today I'm using almost not enough. It's almost drying while I work. And I think that's just because I'm trying to make sure I have not too much on here so that I lose control. So watch for that on yours as well. You can add, see how I did darkness right down the center first? We don't need this level of detail. I just knew some of you would want it. So now I'll just keep going. And if I do those stems, I'm doing very thin lines either on the stem or just to the right of it. Make sure your puddle doesn't get too light right now because we do want to see that lightness when we go in and add that sort of highlight on the left side of those stems. Another thing you could do is if you're painting these leaves and you're painting them a little bit darker than you maybe want for some of the leaf, you can do our technique of lifting, and I'll show you that in a second here. On this one, this is a darker leaf than the others. I'm cleaning my brush, I'm drying my brush, and now I'm going to just actually on this one side lift some right out. Isn't that nice? I like how that's a little bit natural looking. But it is all about timing and how much water, so you really have to watch what you're doing on your paper. And if you need to, just refresh that puddle. Make sure you're working from a puddle. Sometimes for things like this, it's nice to have all the same color. But sometimes I just really like what happens when I have a bunch of different greens. Now you don't want to go too far with like bluish greens and yellowish greens. That's not going to look like it's from the same plant. But if you have slight variations within your color, I think that will be great. I love seeing variations that are very similar to each other next to each other. That's just something I've observed about myself in art. And I think most people like that. Okay, I'm just filling them in. I'm getting around. Okay, and then once again, I got these stems. On the stems, so light on the tip of your brush. Very little water. That's what's important. And if any of your stems right now are quite light, I would darken them up because then we'll dry the whole thing and we'll come back with that light green. Okay, so now we need that light color. Double check it that when you look on your palette, like look at mine now. It's not that different, but I need to make sure that it actually is. Cleaning my brush, adding some water, maybe even adding some yellow paint, making sure it's nice and light. You also want to make sure you basically have the tip of your brush in that puddle because we really do need that fine detail again as we get in here. And now I've fully dried this and I can tell because I don't see the light reflecting on it. And now Now, think about it. It wouldn't always be on the left side of everything. You can use that for a rule if you want. But yeah, on one side or the other of these, you want to add this lighter color. Mine's a little too yellow. I don't think that looks realistic. Slight adjustment here. And like, let's say you do this and you're like, okay, they're just too similar. You just darken up the darker one. Okay, usually I like to do this with the lighter color first. I think that might have worked better. I'm going to do something just to show it to you. I'm going to dry it and come back and darken my dark stems. I think this is going to be pretty powerful effect. Don't be afraid to get in with your dark colors. I know it's more intimidating, but you're just getting more paint, just a little bit of water still, but more paint into that puddle. And you see a depth that you just wouldn't get otherwise. A lot of people are afraid to get into those dark colors. Don't be afraid to. This just gave, I mean, it set those back into that center and just gave a different look. I could then go in and if I wanted to kind of add little shadows underneath some of this. You see that? It gives a little bit more dimension again. But I'll just do that real quick and then I'm going to stop. I just wanted to show this to you. This is absolutely optional right here, okay? But it does sort of give just the idea of a shadow. It's not a perfect little science here, but that's okay. And from here, I can start to grab my ink and outline it. So I'm just gonna say again, you could do any of these inks if you've got a micron pen. It doesn't matter as long as this is fully dry underneath. If you use sort of a regular basic pen like this, you just may end up transferring some of that ink onto your hand or around your paper, so be really careful with that. I'm going to use that ultra fine point Sharpie again. Now, we always dry it before we get to the ink, but because I know I used very little paint on those dark stems, I'm going to start on the Hippo, and I think we're going to be okay. But always make sure it's dry underneath or else your ink's going to get fuzzy. And now we're going to begin. I'm starting with this head. I always feel like when we get to the ink part, it's like, yay, we did it. Sorry, I have an itch. Now, if you've got leaves overlapping, make sure to account for them. So see, I stopped, picked up my pen. I'm actually just going to outline that leaf. And then keep going. And for this one, I just had that line go straight across. Some of you might choose to not fill it in right here. That's up to you. I already can't wait for next week's because I am such a fan of this little series. Try to make those toes really kind of loopy or whatever, like don't lose them, I guess is what I'm saying. Like come up kind of high. Isn't that so cute? I hope you liked learning this plant today. Now you can choose, are you going to go down the stems or did you do a dark enough paint that you don't care? Always artist's choice and you're the artist. And see this one I accidentally filled in, but I still went ahead and did the ink around it because I wanted to. But if you accidentally filled one in, maybe you don't do the ink over it. That's just up to you. I like this one. Well, we're wrapping it up. I'll make sure there's a spot on my Facebook page in case you want to share your artwork with each other there. think I'm going to add my little initials. And then when you're done, I say like quote, when you're done, look at it and see like, am I actually done? Do I like it? Do I want to change anything? Yeah, I think it's great. You guys did an awesome job. Can't wait to see you next week for another planter and another plant.